My name is Josh Baker, and I'm a youth pastor and worship pastor at First Wesleyan Church, Bessemer City.
Josh Baker is a youth pastor at First Wesleyan, Bessemer City, North Carolina. He gave his life to Christ at 19 years old while at a youth camp. He never knew that giving his life to Christ would lead him into the position he is now. While he had a lot of help from his mentors and pastors, he never knew what God was calling him to do, but he realized that very soon.
I was sitting in my room one day, and I just felt God saying, hey, I have something more for you. And I remember a half-hearted prayer that I prayed, and it was like so half-hearted. And it was basically, God, if you want to or whatever, just come on inside.
Josh never expected to be a youth pastor until he went to this youth camp where he met a mentor who helped with what God was calling him to do.
The youth pastor there at this much smaller youth group kind of took me under his wing. He discipled me, and he kind of showed me what it meant to follow Jesus.
As Josh had this youth pastor in this very small youth group, he helped him guide on which way to go and how to follow Jesus in the right way and what his calling was.
Working with these guys, there was something in me that was just like, maybe this is more than just something you do as a 19-year-old new Christian. Maybe this is something I want you to do for the rest of your life. And so, I was going to be a marine biologist, go to UCSD, which is a great school in Southern California for marine biology. But it was in the same way that I think Peter heard Jesus call him and said, I'm going to make you a fisher of men. You're not going to fish anymore. I felt kind of like God was saying that to me, yeah, you can work with dolphins if you want to. You could study sea urchins, or you can pour into the people that I died for and that I love. And I was like, okay.
As Josh was a Christian at this time, he didn't know that it would become a little more, as he was going to school for marine biology at UCSD. But God had a different plan for him, and his plan was for him to spread Christ through the younger generation. All right, Josh, I want to thank you for being here today, and thank you for helping leading younger adults in the right direction.
Yeah. Even people like you, poor kids from the street, just like yourself. My name is Josh Baker, and I'm a youth pastor and worship pastor at First Wesleyan Church, Bessemer City.
All right, Josh, in your journey on becoming a youth pastor, how did all that work out? Like, were you growing up in a Christian family or a Christian household, and if you were, how did that become of you becoming a youth pastor?
Yeah, so I did not grow up in the church. I started coming to church when I was about 16, and we'd come to youth group, and there was like a awesome snack bar and basketball and girls, and I was like, oh, this is a pretty fun place to be, and some friends have invited me. So about a year later, I started feeling something stirring in my soul, and this is a little beyond my calling, but it definitely is all part of it. So like I was sitting in my room one day, and I just felt God saying, hey, I have something more for you. And I remember a half-hearted prayer that I prayed, and it was like so half-hearted. And it was basically, God, like if you want to or whatever, just come on inside. Or whatever, it was like one of the, so I didn't really feel any different, but it was like maybe 2 months later that summer youth camp was happening, and my friend who didn't have much to do with the Lord at all, but he told me, like, again, there's girls there at camp, and you should totally go, and it's going to be awesome. And I was like, well, okay. So ended up going to camp, and at this camp, there was a guy named Miles McPherson who was a former San Diego Charger football player, came from a life of, he got into drugs real bad when he was a football player, and just was enamored with all that lifestyle. So he came out of that, and out of that, the Lord saved him. And he was just like such a compelling, like for the first time in my life, I felt like, even though I had gone to youth group for like a year, I was like, man, this makes so much sense. So I really, at that camp, was like, I might have to do something with all of this. And so I did meet a girl there, and I started going to her youth group, and the youth pastor there at this much smaller youth group kind of took me under his wing. He discipled me, and he kind of showed me what it meant to follow Jesus. And so shortly after I graduated high school, he invited me to leadership there. And that was like, kind of some of the stuff you do, it's like doing announcements, and we'd lead some games, and I'd help with worship and stuff like that. But I got a chance to speak one time, and I'll never forget the message title. It was Stepping Out of Your Comfort Zone. And for me, that was exactly what I was doing. Because I was just this shy Southern California kid. I never thought in a million years I would stand in front of people, let alone with the Word of God, to like do a sermon. And so, but it was exhilarating. It was so much fun to like prepare the message, and then of course I was shaking in my boots, delivering it. But that was kind of a game changer. And then from there, I started working with some of these younger guys. They invited me to be like the junior high director, and there was like maybe 3 kids. And I would call these guys every week. I'd be like, hey man, how can I pray for you? Are you coming to this event? Are you coming to youth on Wednesday? And it was every Tuesday I'd do that. And I just noticed this group started to grow. And then there was a couple of these guys that I started taking under my wing. So we do discipleship, memorize Bible verses, start learning about the Bible. And I also noticed that a lot of these guys, they had really bad home lives. And for me, there was something that I felt the heart of God toward these guys. Like they need somebody that they can look up to. They need their Father in heaven, but they might need an older guy to just show them what that looks like, And I was a new Christ follower, so I didn't know everything at all. Still don't. But yeah, so as I was working with these guys, there was something in me that was just like, maybe this is more than just something you do as a 19-year-old new Christian. Maybe this is something I want you to do for the rest of your life. And so, like, I was gonna be a marine biologist, go to UCSD, which is a great school in Southern California for marine biology. But it was like in the same way that I think Peter heard Jesus call him and said, I'm going to make you a fisher of men. You know, you're not going to fish anymore. I felt kind of like God was saying that to me, like, yeah, you can work with dolphins if you want to. You know, you can study sea urchins, or you can pour into the people that I died for and that I love. And I was like, okay, let's do this. And so then I went to Oklahoma Wesleyan, and it was there where I was sort of trained formally, took Bible classes, and I just ate it all up. So yeah, that's kind of in a nutshell how I came to know Jesus, and then how Jesus kind of led me to the point of making a decision about being a youth pastor. Yeah.
Okay, if you had to describe what it feels like to discipleship kids that were in your position at one time when you were 17 and didn't really know Christ or anything like that, what would you describe it as?
Like, I'm in the position of the 17-year-old?
Mm-hmm. Like, the feeling of you helping the 17-year-old, what would you describe it as?
Oh, that feeling. So, I feel like that's empowering. I feel like there's connection there. You know, like, we all hunger for and desire two things: relationship and leadership, like, no matter who we are. And I think it's very true, especially of men. You know, I think as guys, even though we won't always say it, we hunger for a mentor. So it's like there's this sense where it feels, I don't know, for me it feels empowering. It feels like I'm living my purpose. You know, it feels good. It feels like, I mean, maybe if there's some way that I've stumbled through life and somebody else can learn from both the defeats and the victories, then it's like, that's a win. Yeah.
Of you being a youth pastor, do you think you've made an impact on somebody's life that you didn't even know just by being yourself, really?
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't know. Maybe. I mean, you kind of, you know, as you're kind of living out your life, you would hope that maybe someone was impacted in some kind of ancillary way, you know, that you didn't even know about. But
Okay, so if you had to describe your job as being a youth pastor to a regular world job, I would say, or a regular minimum wage job, how would you say, like, differences and similarities?
Yeah, so similarity would be that it pays about as much. Yeah, so there might be an idea that there are some ministers that are in it for the money, but the vast majority of people in ministry are definitely not in it for the money, especially a smaller denomination like ours. But I think as a pastor, we do have a degree of flexibility, which is really nice just as far as schedule goes. And it's almost like a self-employment, because really the burden is on us to have the initiative and the vision to carry the things out that we're doing. And so it's a lot like being self-employed that way. That personal drive and initiative really has to be there. And if you don't have the calling, if you don't have that sense of calling, then I know people that maybe sort of were like, oh, this might be a good idea, but then they kind of sputter out because they really didn't have this deep sense of calling for ministry. And so, you know, when it comes to being self-directed, that just maybe wasn't there so much, because they didn't have the burden, they didn't have the calling. The flexibility is different. the self-direction, but similarities. I have a boss. We have our senior pastor, and we take some direction from him. Gloria, of course, is like a boss. She keeps everything straight for us. But yeah, I think in the perfect world, though, it is a job like other jobs in that, for me, not everybody's this way as a youth pastor, but for me, I do get a paycheck for doing that. And yeah, it's, there's certain hours I'm expected to keep. I have a board that also is kind of like my boss. And really, in our denomination, you can edit this out if you want to, but it's like really all the people are our boss, like the way it's set up. So, and so that's interesting because in a real sense, as a pastor in like the Wesleyan Church, like for Pastor Matt, his boss is the people, right? Like they vote him in. And so that's just an interesting dynamic when you have, for him, maybe like 300 people that, in a sense, are a boss. So, I don't know. That's kind of a long, winding answer, but there you go.
All right, Josh, I want to thank you for being here today, and thank you for helping leading younger adults in the right direction.
Yeah. Even people like you, poor kids from the street, just like yourself.